Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom and welcome. Tonight, our service is dedicated to the heart of democracy, dedicated to the right to vote. In the shadow of the first anniversary of January 6th, 2021, we need healing. We need to light lights of hope. And so we light candles at vigils that mourn lost lives and lost dreams. We light candles and bring light back into the seams between the night and the day, the holy and the not yet holy, between them and us. And we light candles to see a path forward as one. We light candles to see the truth. We light candles to feel hope, and we light candles on Shabbat to give us the time and the taste of a better world, to renew and heal our bruised and battered souls, and restore our faith in the future. So I'm glad we can see Denise and Daniel lighting their candles. We're going to light ours right here. And we hope everyone is lighting with us as we bring a little more Shabbat light into creation. The very first thing that was created was light. So please join us as we take a little light inside and offer the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shal Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen. And we don't do any of this alone. Tonight we have our own Denise Lieberman, who's going to guide us and teach us and lead us and inspire us just when we need it the most, right now, as we go forward and protect our democracy and the right to vote. But we can always use a little help from some angels. So let's join together as we sing the words of this Shabbat hymn, Shalom Aleichem, while asking the angels to come and bless us with Shabbat peace.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharim, Malachi Elyon, Malachi Harachamim, Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malachi HaShalom, Malachi Elyon, Malachi HaRachamim, Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni L'Shalom, Malachi HaShalom, Malachi Elyon, Malachi HaRachamim, Mi Melech, Malachi HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruchuni L'Shalom, Malachi HaShalom, Malachi Elyon, Malachi HaRachamim, Mi Melech, מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. One more verse.
Okay.
Come in peace.
Come in peace.
Go toward peace. It's always toward.
Toward.
Lishalom.
Lishalom.
It's
Toward
an
peace,
aspiration.
right? Yes.
Tzedachem l'shalom.
Yes.
Malachi ha-shalom. Malachi elyon. Malachi ha-rachamim. Mi melech. Malachi ha-melachim. Hakadosh Baruch Hu. The aspiration is peace. The aspiration is peace. Leave, come, bless, peace.
And go in peace. Because there's work to be done. Say just a word about the Sephardic version and how it adds that Malchei Harachamim.
Angels of mercy.
Yeah.
The middle pole, the pole of balance.
Yeah.
The angels of mercy.
Adds those. There's, there's all kinds of angels. Angels on high, right? But there's also angels of mercy.
Angels of mercy.
And they keep us humble, you know.
They keep you also balanced.
Balanced.
The middle pole.
Yeah. Right. Compassion, mercy, rachamim. So we're going to do a little bit of an abbreviated service tonight.
No lechadodi?
Oh, okay. Well,
2 verses.
fast. We'll do a little lechadodi because how can you have Shabbat without welcoming the Shekhinah?
Did I ever tell you the story of...
Yes, you did many times. Everybody's heard the story.
All right.
About watching the Shekhinah. St. Francis and St. Clair.
Come, my beloved, let us welcome the Shabbos. We call her a queen or a bride. Malchut. She's the funnel through which all the divine overflow enters the world. Come, let us welcome her. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor v'dibur echad, yishmiyanu el hamichad. Adonai echad, shemo echad, v'shemu l'tiferet v'lichila. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat kabela. Boi b'shalom atere bala, gam b'simcha u'b'tzot chola. Toch emunei am segula. Boi kala, boi kala, boi kala, boi kala. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat kabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela.
Couldn't do it without the Sabbath bride.
I could tell you the story of
I know, it's It's a good story.
All right.
Not tonight.
Okay.
But we should call each other to prayer now.
Okay.
With the words of the Baruch.
Baruch hu et Adonai Mevorach. Baruch Adonai Mevorach, Mevorach Leolam Vaed. Mevorach, Mevorach Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
We are in those difficult portions of the Torah where the plagues come and make things much more difficult than they ever were, where Pharaoh's heart continues to be hardened more and more. And yet we know, because we do this story every year, that in a moment we'll be on our path to freedom. It's not an easy path. It's not a path it's a path we know will have many bumps in the road and many challenges, but at least we know it is that shalom. It's a path. It's a path that takes us a little bit further. So to remember that in every service we sing the same words that Moses and Miriam and all of the people of Israel sang at the shores of the sea. It is one of the great freedom songs of all time and has inspired so many more. So many seas that have had to be crossed.
You want me to sing?
Yeah, I'd like to.
You want me to tell the story?
Tell us.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נוראתי לא תוסף אלה, מלכותך על בניך, בוקיים לפני משה. זה אלי, זה אלי, זה אלי, זה אלי, זה אלי, זה אלי, זה אלינו יאמרו. אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק ממנו. As you redeemed Jacob and saved him from arms that were stronger than his own, so may you redeem all who are oppressed and persecuted. Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Israel. Then Miriam, Haniviyah, the prophetess, she took a drum in her hand and we all followed her with drums and dancing. And Miriam, 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 the prophetess, sang with us. Shiru le'Adonai ki ga'oka. Shiru le'Adonai ki ga'oka. Shiru le'Adonai ki ga'oka. Shiru le'Adonai ki ga'oka. Sus v'rochvo rama v'yam. Sus v'rochvo rama v'yam. Shiru le'Adonai ki ga'oka. Shiru le'Adonai ki ga'oka. Fros aleinu sukat shalomecha, spread over us the shelter of your peace. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. Spread over us the shelter of peace over us, over all people, and over Jerusalem, Jerusalem. We are praying for the peace of Jerusalem, Jerusalem. We are praying for the peace of Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Shameru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש, שבת ויהי נפש. You know the children of Israel should keep the Shabbos. Observing it in every generation is a covenant for all time. It is a sign. It is a sign forever, Susie, between me and the people of Israel, because in 6 days the Eternal One made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day, Susie, God rested. Vayi nafash, vayi nafash. God breathed the soul into creation. Vayi nafash. God breathed the soul into creation, Susie.
I can feel it. Shabbat. Me too. Get a little soul on Shabbat. In thinking about a special psalm for this night where we do what we can to heal from the devastation of a year ago and this past year, and move us a little bit forward toward a kind of redemption. I thought about Psalm 85, one of the psalms that Jim put to music after we offered all 150 psalms at one of the darkest times in our country's story. We offered a different psalm every day to heal the soul of the nation. And many of you joined us as we dove into the psalms and asked them for some wisdom. So Psalm 85 promises that out of the darkness, redemption will come. It says specifically when truth is told with loving kindness, the truth about what really happened on January 6th, truth about how we got there, truth about who and what are responsible, truth about the legacy of this country, truth about what the insurrection was really about. When truth is told with loving kindness, the psalm promises us, then justice and peace will kiss.
You returned, restored the dispersed, brought us back from the edge. Won't you return to revive us? Let us see some kind of kindness. What might God say? Kiss, kiss,
Kiss, kiss.
peace for people. Kiss, kiss for the pious. Kiss, kiss, what might people say? Kiss, kiss, what might people say? Don't return to folly. How long will you stay angry? Return, revive us, joy. We want some joy in here again. And truth from the earth, and righteousness from the heavens, and good, good, good from God and the earth and its produce. Kiss, 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 loving kindness and truth. Kiss, 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 dignity again in our land. Chesed and Emet when they meet. Kiss, kiss, righteousness and peace. Kiss, kiss, how close to the devotion is dignity again in our land. And truth from the earth, oh, righteousness from the heavens, and good, good, good from God and the earth and its produce. Kiss, 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 righteousness. Then the way of footsteps, how close to the devotion is dignity again in our land. Loving kindness and truth when they meet. Kiss, kiss, oh, righteousness and peace when they meet. Kiss, kiss, oh, righteousness and peace when they meet. Kiss, kiss, dignity again in our land. Righteousness and peace, we want some joy in here again. Righteousness and peace, chesed and emet. Kiss, 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 righteousness and peace.
Truth and loving kindness, justice and peace will kiss. Thanks, Jimmy. The photograph was one of the Philip Deutsch photographs. And it was from yesterday, from all of those brave souls who stood out there in more than freezing weather to make a statement and to stand up for truth, democracy, and of course for protecting our right to vote. So we learned that one person in the story of our people, again and again, one person can make a difference. It took Moses to keep us together, to motivate, to move. And we have Denise Lieberman to lead us and make sure that Missouri stays on the map as part of the solution and not the problem. Not an easy task. Denise Lieberman is the Faculty Director of Voter Access and Engagement. She's nationally renowned as an expert on voting rights. She directs the Power and Democracy program at the Advancement Project and is an adjunct professor of law and political science at WashU. Here in St. Louis, of course, she coordinates the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition, which is really we are so grateful for, and we would be nowhere. Where would we be without this amazing coalition that brings like-hearted people, bipartisan, nonpartisan, like-hearted people, which is so important, together. Denise has litigated challenges to voting laws in Missouri, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and she is a member of our voting rights Chavurah. She is, I also have to say, the daughter of our own Joy Lieberman. Joy, I know you're watching. We're all sending you so much love because you are our Shiro. Joy Lieberman has been fighting for the right to vote, the right to access to voting. No picture, photo IDs required. Joy, we call her. And, she really, when Joy speaks, people listen. And I also want to mention, because of what we're doing tonight, that you are, of course, the daughter of our own Joy, but also of the late Larry of blessed memory. I remember all of those road trips to Jefferson City with Larry. Oh my God, he wouldn't recognize Jefferson City today. But we went many times together to fight the good fight. And I hold him in my heart, as I know you do. Neither one of your parents, Denise, ever stopped working for the voice of the people, for the right to vote. So let me give you a little bit of my Torah, and then you're going to hear the great Torah tonight from Denise. But a little Torah because these portions really demand a little Torah. It was when the plagues finally hit home and his firstborn son lay dead before him that Pharaoh finally let the people go. Pharaoh had to suffer the desperate grief that the people had known. The people with the privilege, you see, had to feel the oppression, the desperation, and the vulnerability for something to finally change. Pharaoh, whose very name means the great divider, felt his and their pain, and so he let us go. But he knew human nature, and he said to Moses as we left, "Beware of the evil that will go before your face. Beware of the evil that will continue to challenge you. The evil that comes from fear, from greed, from the need to make me great by making you less. The evil of blaming and revenge. The evil of hate. The evil of hardened hearts that tend to forget where we have come from and who we are." And Pharaoh was right. Again and again, we would be blinded by the evil before our faces, and we would complain that there was no food. But then, by God's grace, we would have manna. We would complain that there was no meat, and from love, we would have quail. We would fetch that there was no water, and the well of Miriam would miraculously open. We would complain that there was no justice, and then we would receive the law. And evil would come before our faces again and again as we pushed forward to have a home where we could be free. And we would have leaders to remind us that our children deserved better. And so, in spite of ourselves, we would be reminded that we could do and be better. And we remembered Pharaoh's challenge. And we swore again and again that we would not do to others what was done to us. That we would not shame because we know what it is to be shamed. That we would not blame because we know what it is to be scapegoats and to be blamed. That we would not make anyone other because we know what it is to be outside of the tent. That we would not take revenge because we know that with revenge, the cycle of violence never ends. And we would see the face of God in everyone and pray that they would see it in us. We would feed the poor and clothe the naked and free the prisoner. We would keep our land open to the refugee and the immigrant and the stranger because we know that place. We know that heart. We would never do to others what was done to us because the very reason we are here, our purpose is to be better, to do better, and to make the world a better place, not just for ourselves, but for all creation. And we would remember that for all creation means the air and the water and the land and the sky, all connected. And that when we hurt the balance of infinite outwardness, we suffer infinitely within. We suffer within with hardened hearts. And that all creation means that we can only have a healthy democracy if everyone, absolutely everyone, has a voice and an access to vote. But evil is always there, just before our faces, as Pharaoh said. So, we must be vigilant. We must march even when it's 0 degrees outside. We have to continue to sing, and we will pray, and we will learn, and we will say no to the evil before our faces that dares to harden our hearts. And the love that we have for each other, that unconditional love, it will change everything at last. So let's hear from our own Denise Lieberman what it is we need to do to keep going forward, to keep our hearts from hardening, and to keep that evil from clouding the view. This is the, even more than we say, protect for democracy, we say unmute yourself. I guess maybe that's a metaphor too. Nobody should be muted in this democracy. Here we go.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that.
Oh, do.
So can we hear you now, Denise?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. You almost got another psalm there. Okay. Great.
Second time's a charm. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Susan, Rabbi Jim. Shabbat shalom, everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you tonight. On this somber evening, the day after, of course, the 1-year anniversary of the brutal assault on our nation's capital, an attempt to overturn the duly held elections of the 2020 election. Many of us are feeling distraught. The January 6th attacks on our democracy made us realize the fragility of our democracy, the fragility of our right to vote. And certainly many of you would agree that this is the quintessential battle and issue of our moment. The battle for who gets to have a say and on what terms. And many of us may think, because of how the struggle for the right to vote is framed in the news, in the media, that this is really a political issue, an issue of partisanship. But my message to you here tonight is that our struggle for the right to vote, our battle for our democracy, is truly one that is rooted in our faith. That the fight for the right to vote is quintessentially a moral imperative, a religious issue. Because at the end of the day, the right to vote is about having a voice. It's about who has to have a say. It is truly the way that we speak in a public sense. It is the mechanism that we have to hold our leaders accountable. It is the mechanism we have to have a say in our futures, to have a voice in matters that impact us in our communities, to have a say in our children's destinies. And indeed, it is quintessentially a Jewish struggle. Throughout history, Jews in particular have been involved in the fight for the right to vote, in the fight to ensure that all people have a say, have a voice. Indeed, Jews have always been involved in liberation struggles. And the right to vote is the ultimate liberation struggle. Because not only is our struggle to vote about having a voice, about having a say in our futures, but it is also the way that we recognize the legitimacy of others' voices. Indeed, the battle for the right to vote is about basic human dignity. It is the societal mechanism we have that tells you that you count, quite literally. When you vote, we count you. And so when the right to vote is denied or abridged, what does that say? It says you don't count. And we know that the Torah teaches us that all humanity is vested with dignity. And that is a reason that Jews throughout history have been involved in the struggle for our right to vote. We may be feeling the fragility of that right now. I know I am. But keep in mind that the story of America's history is one of struggle for the right to vote. And the truth is that it has been an ongoing struggle since the dawn of this civilization, when only white male property owners were given a voice in their communities, in their destinies, in the leadership. And the truth is that while we give great credence to our democracy here in this country, reality has never matched that ideal. We've never had a true democracy, even as we fought to expand access. Indeed, back in 1886, while states throughout the South were amending their constitutions to enshrine literacy tests and poll taxes, and the KKK and groups like the Red Shirts were enacting brutal violence against African Americans who dared to register to vote. The Supreme Court, in a case called Wicks v. Ho, pronounced that the right to vote is a fundamental right because it is preservative of all other rights. And in 1964, the year before the passage of the Voting Rights Act, when literacy tests and poll taxes continued to relegate citizens of color to second-class citizenship. In 1964, when Freedom Summer volunteers were brutally murdered for simply attempting to register citizens in Mississippi, the Supreme Court pronounced that the right to vote freely for a candidate of one's choice is the essence of a democratic society, and any restrictions strike at the heart of representative government. And of course, we know that it was the persistent vigilance of advocates and activists and citizens and everyday citizens across this country that worked to get those laws changed. The acts of so many, like Congressman John Lewis of blessed memory, marching across that Edmund Pettus Bridge to ultimately result in the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that dramatically expanded access to the ballot box. And today, to be sure, American democracy is at a crossroads. At a crossroads unlike one we have seen since the post-Reconstruction era, when those states went about changing their constitutions to implement those literacy tests and poll taxes. In 2020, we saw record voter turnout at the polls, particularly record turnout by people of color and young voters, despite a deadly pandemic. And yet, what we saw since that time was an effort to delegitimize their voices, delegitimize their votes through disinformation, lies, that led to the violent assault on our Capitol last January 6th. And it didn't stop there. The very same lies that fueled the assault on our Capitol on January 6th perpetuated and led to the introduction of a record number of bills, over 400 restrictive voting bills introduced in 49 out of the 50 states in 2021, targeting the very practices that made voting accessible for the communities that turned out so heavily in 2020. Measures to make it harder to vote by mail. Measures to make it illegal to provide assistance to voters who needed assistance getting applications, getting ballots. Measures that would even make it illegal to provide food or water to people standing in long lines after their communities shutter polling place locations that generate those long lines in communities of color. And even more than that, that big lie led to efforts to delegitimize the very democratic process itself. We saw over 180 bills introduced in 2021 that would strip election authorities of their ability to administer elections, that would even criminalize acts of local election administrators. Indeed, even bills that would give partisan actors the ability to overturn duly administered election results. A bill that was introduced in Missouri last year would have actually given the legislature the ability to overturn the results of elections that were submitted by election authorities. And right here in Missouri, our own Senator Josh Hawley encouraged the events of January 6th to an attempt to refuse to certify those election results. And our own state chief election official, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, just this week pointed to Texas's new voting legislation as a model he'd like to bring to Missouri. Legislation that is largely regarded as the most restrictive voting bill in the country. And the day before that anniversary, on Wednesday, the Missouri legislature opened its 2022 legislative session in Jefferson City with several dozen bills already pre-filed that would affect our ability to cast a ballot here in Missouri. Legislation to enshrine strict photo ID requirements to vote by eliminating many forms of identification that Missouri voters successfully already use to verify their identity at the polls. It would even make illegal showing that voter registration card you get from the election authority that confirms your eligibility to vote in that election. We see queued up legislation that would make it harder to vote by mail. If the 2020 election cycle amid a pandemic taught us anything, it's that voters appreciate the ability to be able to cast ballots by mail. Missouri was already one of the hardest states to cast a ballot by mail. Missouri is one of the few states that severely limit who is able to vote absentee. 34 states and the District of Columbia allow any voter to cast an absentee ballot without providing a reason to the government. Here in Missouri, unless you meet a strict list of reasons you cannot make it to the polls on Election Day, you cannot vote absentee. Legislation that is queued up here in 2022 would enshrine those restrictions even further. We are also seeing attacks on the citizen initiative process. The core of democracy, really nothing is more purely democratic than citizens taking issues they want heard to the people. That's what the ballot initiative process does. It's something that's existed in Missouri for over 100 years. It's particularly important in a state like Missouri that is so heavily gerrymandered, where many voters feel that those sitting in the halls of our legislature don't necessarily represent them or their interests. The citizen initiative process gives voters the ability to put measures they'd like to see considered before a vote of the people. And it's worked successfully here in Missouri for over 100 years. Legislation that is currently pending in Missouri would make that process harder. In fact, nearly impossible for many grassroots efforts. And indeed, it is already queued up. The very first hearing on elections that we are slated to see is going to occur next Wednesday, January 12th, on a measure called HJR 79. It's a resolution that's similar to legislation we saw introduced last year that would make it much harder for citizens to have their voices heard through the initiative process by doing two things. By increasing the threshold number of signatures that citizens would have to get in order to place a measure on the ballot for consideration, and by increasing the threshold for those measures to win. Currently, if citizens place a measure on the ballot and it gets a majority vote, it wins. These measures would increase that threshold to 2/3. A threshold that's very, very difficult, even for measures that are widely popular, like, for example, Medicaid expansion, which passed in Missouri by just shy of 2/3. So we're making our first trip to Jefferson City next Wednesday to let lawmakers know how we feel about our right to vote. And we'll be back there again when they hold hearings on photo ID. And we'll be back there again when they hold hearings to further restrict the ability of voters to cast ballots by mail. And we'll be back there again when they hear measures to strip local election authorities of their autonomy, of their ability to freely and fairly administer elections in Missouri. And this is our fight. This is our battle. And I know we will get there. I'm also hopeful because there's federal legislation that is currently pending that could come to a vote in the next 2 weeks that could enshrine critical protections for our right to vote. Measures that would be dispositive. Some of the greatest voting rights legislation that we've seen since the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That includes the Freedom to Vote Act. The Freedom to Vote Act is a transformative piece of legislation that would address that election sabotage I told you about earlier. It would make Election Day a federal holiday. It would guarantee voters the ability to cast ballots by mail. It would guarantee 2 weeks of early voting. It would ensure that citizens who've been convicted of a felony and served their time would have their right to vote restored upon their release from incarceration. Currently in America, over 5 million citizens are denied the right to vote because of a criminal conviction in their past, and 3/4 of them are not in prison. They have served their time because of laws like Missouri has that continue to disqualify you from voting during any period of post-incarceration supervision if you're on probation or parole. Some states even permanently disenfranchise you. The Freedom to Vote Act would provide a critical level floor of access for all voters. The second piece of legislation that is currently pending is the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, named after the late Congressman John Lewis. We have seen efforts by states and even in the courts to limit the effectiveness and strength of the Voting Rights Act. 2 key court decisions, one in 2013 and one just this year in 2021, severely weakened the protections of the Voting Rights Act to block discriminatory voting laws. In her dissenting opinion in that first case, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory said throwing out the protections of the Voting Rights Act when it has worked is like throwing out your umbrella during a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. And what we've seen since the erosion of these legal protections is a full-out assault on our democracy, on our freedom to vote. And so we're calling on everyone during this critical period. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has urged these measures to come to a vote in the Senate leading into the Martin Luther King Day holiday weekend. We are urging you to call your Senators Blunt and Hawley, at 833-345-2551 and urge them to remove blockages to allowing this vote to take place. And we're urging you to call the White House. The influence of President Biden in this fight is important. He has said that the battle for the right to vote is the battle of our moment, and his influence is important. You can call the White House comment line at 833-345-2554. That line is open Tuesdays through Thursdays between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Let them know you're a constituent and that you believe in the power of our democracy. And finally, we urge you to join our fight here in Missouri. The Missouri Voter Protection Coalition is a nonpartisan statewide network of voter advocates who work day in and day out to protect our freedom to vote through policy advocacy in Jefferson City and in DC, through legal advocacy and litigation, through voter education and engagement, and through our signature service program, Election Protection, providing on-the-spot assistance to voters at the polls on Election Day so that no voter ever has to leave a polling place without casting a ballot and having help in doing so. This is a somber time, and it's a scary time. The events of January 6th did reveal the fragility of our democracy, but we have been in these struggles before, and we stand on the shoulders of so many leaders, so many ancestors who've paved the way and shown that indeed it can be done. As Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And I'm going to add, but only if we push it. But together we can do so, because the right to vote belongs to each and every one of us. It is our voices, and we can stand up and demand to be heard. So please join our efforts. Join the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. Join the Central Reform Congregation Voting Rights Chavurah, which has just taken on this issue by storm and going out into the streets, and be part of this important fight to ensure that all voices are heard, that all people are granted the dignity of their voice. Thank you.
Amen. 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 Beautiful, Denise. Thank you so much. I think what we're going to do is clip your talk and put it on our website so that we can keep playing it again and again, because you are just so clear and you frame this challenge so perfectly and so beautifully. And you're right, we've got a great Chavurah, and we hope everybody has been inspired to join. You can click on there and fill out the form, and they meet every Wednesday. Every Wednesday, 5:00, right? And you can find it on our website, and then you get reminders. And I really want to give a shout out. The whole Chavurah is amazing. They really are. People who have been doing this work for a long time and have a lot of skin in the game. I'd like to give a particular shout out to Chris Hexter, who somehow kept this Chavurah going and didn't let it skip a beat, and showed up just when we needed him, even though he just had open heart surgery. So somehow, even with his surgery, he knew that this was a critical time for all of us, and kept his heart, in the work. So thank you, Chris. And I'm not going to try to name everyone, because I know I'll miss somebody really important, because everybody in that Chavurah really is doing a great job and shows up and really cares. So join us. Denise is part of the Chavurah. Oh my God, how lucky are we? And the calls on Monday morning too. I don't know, Denise, if you want to say something about those calls, but the calls are just so informative. And if you want to keep up with what's going on, the calls on Monday mornings at 10 o'clock, right? At 10 o'clock are tremendous. And I know Denise is trying to say something there, Autumn, but we will have ways for people to sign up for the calls as well when you become part of the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. And you know what's going on, and the calls are recorded as well if you can't be on at 10 in the morning. So I find them tremendously helpful. It keeps you really on the front line. So thank you. We had I know that Chavurah wanted us to do a freedom song and some chanting and everything, but I think what we're going to do for time's sake is we're going to skip that, and the next time we're in person, we'll do some chants and we'll do some freedom songs. But I think right now we need to turn to the Mishaberach. We need to turn to our healing prayer, because there are a lot of people that are hurting right now. So I'm going to ask Jim to give us a healing prayer. I want to begin the list tonight for two families that are in mourning. One is the family of Jack Oglander, who just today is the year anniversary of our Jack's death, and I know they're all together and remembering him tonight. And also the family of Susan Carlson, Jerry Griman and his family and his kids. It's Jerry's birthday today, and we just buried Susan this past week. And just pray for all the people who are grieving right now. We also want to make a special shout out to Bear Robinson, our own Bear, who is healing right now. I think he's in rehab. But special prayers for Bear. Special prayers for Lois Loomstein. Special prayers for Suzanne Schroeder and Meredith Berkowitz. Sherry Hugler O'Donnell and Kay Walpert. Eileen Ehrlich and Shirley Petition. Gloria Lash. Lois Chait. Sharon Linder. Doug Pop. Sylvia Ginsburg. Mary Lou Bollinger. Ron Kramer. Renee Marver. Gabriel Adams, Justice Matthews, Sammy Schaas, Margie Katz, Paul Hershkowitz's granddaughter, Paige, and also for Liz, who I understand tested positive, so we're praying for you, Liz. Moisha Foster, Ruth and Nikki Neimark, Ruth Groff, Michael Ramalt, Barbara Woodruff, Stephanie Pratelle, Ilan Nissenboim, Tammy Holland, Bob Fox, Bracha Zelda, Bat Rachel Golda, Miriam Fields, Will Stroke, Michael and Kathy Davenport, Lori and Maya Becker, Marcia Marsh, Vara Kropf, Joan Butcher, Aubrey Yawitz, Nancy's dad, who's 105, Marvin Crane, Bear Robinson we have on here, and I think that's the
family of Mark Steinhoff.
We pray for you as well. Were there any other names that came through on the chat? So for all of these people we hold in our hearts, once again we reach to the angels to bring them refuah shlema, to bring them healing.
For the healing of the spirit and the healing of the body. For those we know, for those we don't know. On my right, the angel Michael. On my left, the angel Gabriel. In front of me, the angel Uriel. Behind me, Raphael. And above my head, Shekhinah Tail. Baruch atah Adonai Rofei HaCholim. Blessed are you, great healer. Amen.
Amen. Amen. We don't know how these healing prayers work. I know they don't always work on the body, but God willing, they help the spirit and the soul. And now, the Elenu. I think Denise has given us a tremendous charge to take upon us what we can do. Everyone can do something in this vote, in this work to protect our democracy, and especially to protect the right to vote for everyone. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liyotzeh bereshit, Shelo asanu kugeye haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot ha'adama. Shelo sam chalkenu kachem, vegor aleinu kachol hamonam. Ve'anachnu korim, u'mashtachavim, u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. Shehu noteh shamayim ve'yosed haaretz, Moshev yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, u'shchinatu zo, begofei meromim. Hu Eloheinu ein od, emet malkeinu efes ulato, kakatu b'torato, v'yadata hayom v'hashivota el levavecha, ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, b'shamayim mima'al, ve'al haaretz, mitachat ein od, v'ne'emar, ve'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. And now we turn our hearts to those who have died at this time in years past, and also those who have a yahrzeit at this time. And once again, I mention, because today is the year anniversary of his death, our own past president, great friend, inspiration, Jack Oglander. Also Robert Fauser and Eleanor Flegel, Ann Alter, Tootsie Esrock, Peter Fishman, Erwin Pollack, Carl Wiley, Ann Fetterman, Emily Engelhardt, Connie Wacker, Alvin Nissenbaum, Tammy Kime, Marcel Pollack, Bernard Tobin, Gary Rikus, Joan Klein, Michael Kiernan, Father Robert Johnston, Orietta Cohn, Dan Sokol, Dr. Erica Gartner, Herbert Fagan, Gail Hollyfeld, Alex Hochberg, Ethan Gonzalez, Raphael Berger, Marie Elaine Nicholson, Tucker Wright, Ed Lander, Tyler Shemwell, Andy Neiman, Bobby Morell, Judge Roberta Hitt, Andy Rockman, Gary Weinecke, Matt Friedman, Janice Marks, Karen Margot, Art Peters, Suzanne Cooperman Gill, Joan Zucker, Allison and Josie Abitz, Bernard Davis, Carol Fleischer, Linda Holtzman, Frank Backlaman, Judy Hunter, Beatrice Daniel, Kyle Currier, Adam Meany, Barrett Braun, John Proletsky, Shirley Berman, Emma Sue Coney, Pat Denlow, Nina Levine, Ruth Gusdorf, Charles Fremder, Robert William Pierce, Michael Huxley, Dr. Stan Frager, David Spiros, Susan Carlson, Mert Arnowitz Woolman, Dr. Paige Powers, and 100-year-old woman, the mother of Carla and Cindy Giller. She was 100 years old in September, and her name was Harriet Barron, and I want to make sure everybody knows it isn't our Harriet Barron, our young Harriet Barron, but Harriet Barron, who's the mother of Carla and Cindy Giller, who was 100 years old. So the yahrzeit list, yeah.
St. Clair Booker.
Thank you.
Deborah Hill. Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier.
Ruth Boleslav.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The yahrzeits for this week are James Bohm, Ed Fogel, Annie Goldstein, Bonnie Kondla, Evelyn Krauss, Elaine Lebsack, Jack, of course, Priscilla Vandervelde, Lottie Barnholtz, Rachel Berkowitz, Ted Grazeman, Rose Siegel, Toby Udovich, Sally Bohm, Bill Caulfield, Fred Feigenblatt, Evie Goldberg, such a great lady, Raymond Hyatt, Elnora Love, C.J. Pleitner, David Selesky, Earl Abrams, Calvin DeShields, Jerry Hyman, Irma Klein, Marion May, Thomas Burke, Sophie Kraselnik, Mary Jane Edwards, Louis Fernandez, Barbara Finley Donahue, David Kogan, Helen Marks, Eugene Weiss, Jack Lipsitz, Bob Skrenka, Adina Talve Goodman, Morris Tamarin, Stuart Williams, Preston Bank, Marcus Bluestein, Lucy Goldman, Thea Matthews, Barbara Sarback, Daniel Tucker, and Anna Zoll. And someone we left out last week was Hannah Zimmerman, Liz Hershkowitz's dear mother, who really was also an inspiration.
Mark Steinhoff.
Thank you.
Theo Wilson.
For all of these people we named, for all the people you hold in your hearts. Betty White. If anybody has Instagram, check out the Instagram account called Dance With Me Betty. It's our 95-year-old father's Instagram account. He was trying to get Betty White to dance with him. But I guess that's not going to happen now. Maybe in the next world. So for all of these good people, let the words of the Kaddish defy death as we live more fully. I'd like to mention my nephew, Garrett Hill. His, a new nephew born this week who will bear his name. God takes and God gives. So the Kaddish dares us to defy the darkness of death with life. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba Be'alma divrach Yerutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayedachol be'Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam almei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah v'yichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbachata v'nechmata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chayim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mirmav Uya oseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. May the source of peace bring peace to you who mourn, comfort to all who are bereaved, as we say together. Amen. That word amen comes from faith. Say amen. It means we have faith. The good in us will win. A big thank you to you, Denise Lieberman, and to the Voting Rights Chavurah, to our wonderful Chavurah. I hope we've drummed up a lot of business for our Chavurah tonight. Hope everybody wants to join, because this is the fight of our time. And, all the other things like reproductive freedom and all the other things that are so essential to what we know is right. These depend on our right to vote and have our voices be heard. So let's end with a blessing.
Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom.
May it be a Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, shalom. Shabbat shalom,
Shabbat where we are renewed
Shabbat shalom
in our souls. Drink in all the wonderful teachings. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha
Will the upper root and the lower root find each other? It will be a secret, generous wisdom. And every individual will be known as a version of God. King Yehi Ratzon.
Inshallah. King Yehi Ratzon. Let this be God's will, our will.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. And thanks again, Denise. Hi, Daniel. And,
Shabbat Shalom, Joy.
Love you, Joy. And a big thank you to Autumn, who worked really hard to get all those, to make sure you can hear us and be with us, and that we got all that good information up on the screens today.
There's a little
Thanks,
doggy.
Autumn.